welcome to this week's episode of News for Normies, where I bring you the week's worth of important news topics in a somewhat short time frame. This week we've got news, politics, some cultural stuff, and a lot of religion at the end, which may get a little spicy. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I would recommend you go over to Rumble. And on that note, follow me on all the social medias. I will have those in the description below, as well as references for a lot of these posts and news stories here. That way you can read them and, gives me a little bit of credibility, unlike the fake news of CNN and MSNBC and the like. So with that, we're going to get started. And starting this week, we are going to start with some good news. CBS has announced that the network will be ending The Late Show, hosted by Stephen Colbert, in May of 2026, citing a financial decision to end the decades-long late-night TV show. It is unclear what Stephen Colbert will do next, but I imagine with the loss of this job at the network, he will now have time on his hands to try writing funnier material going forward. This announcement came shortly after Paramount settled a lawsuit with President Trump, which, if you remember, was about their the 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. So the timing of this had several Democratic politicians saying that this is more of a political move instead of a financial one. However, CBS was spending approximately $100 million per year on The Late Show, but the ad revenue from 2024 was $57.7 million. So they were spending almost double what they were bringing back in, and that was to just break even, not even make money off of the show. So it's pretty easy to see why they would want to end it. Yeah, don't know what he's going to do next, but maybe he'll get funnier now. Now, sadly, a shooting occurred at a church in Lexington, Kentucky, resulting in 4 people shot as well as the shooter. Pastor Jeremy Gum was the wife at this church, and his wife Beverly and one of their daughters, Christina Combs, were sadly killed. Pastor Gum and a Kentucky state trooper were critically injured, but both are still in the hospital. They are both expected to survive. The shooter, who I will not name, is suspected to have attacked the church for revenge, as it is alleged that he was dating one of the pastor's daughters. However, when that daughter was not there, he just decided to go after the rest of the family. So, I'm not entirely sure what happened between this dirtbag and the daughter. Maybe she realized he was a dirtbag and was like, get out. I don't know, but crazy people do what crazy people do. In another sad story here, promise not all these are going to be sad. Three sheriff's deputies were killed in Los Angeles County after a bomb exploded at the Biscaylos, I think is how you pronounce it, Biscaylos Regional Training Center. These deputies were in the process of moving unexploded ordnance when one of the pieces accidentally exploded. At this time, it seems that it was just a sheer accident and not a deliberate attack against law enforcement that we've seen in recent weeks. I'm not entirely sure, why they were moving unexploded bombs. Again, it was a training center, so, maybe it was just a freak accident in training or something. But it is sad that 3 sheriff's deputies died because of an accident like this. I know here where I live, they do bomb training, once a month or something, very, very close to where I live. And they take that stuff very seriously. So, maybe something just got bumped, and went boom. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, it's not a deliberate attack from left-wing crazies, and if anybody is saying that, then they are blatantly lying. Now, that's a real good segue. Tulsi Gabbard is set on declassifying all of the files, not on Jeffrey Epstein, but on the Trump-Russia hoax, and has announced that she has given all of the files to President Trump. Yeah, this is one that I was talking about like last week or the week before, and I think it's something that needs to be declassified, as the Obama administration and top people within several of the intelligence agencies blatantly lied about that. So, and you can go watch my previous video or 2 weeks ago. I talked more about that back then. So, and there are references in those videos as well. That way you can read up on them yourselves. Interestingly, this is a story that's kind of gaining ground, but not as much as Jeffrey Epstein. The New York Times reports that the Biden autopen wasn't actually authorized by Biden himself, and therefore some of his pardons may not be valid. Rand Paul is now calling for criminal investigations into Anthony Fauci once again, which I think needs to happen. However, it also seems like this may be a distraction from the Epstein debacle so that the Trump administration can move on from that. Now, I do think that not Jeffrey Epstein, got Epstein on the brain. I think Anthony Fauci should be investigated, as he was, like the top doctor for the federal government for like 5 decades. And he was one of the top people in the whole AIDS crisis in the 80s that actually ended up killing a lot of people that could have been helped. You can go look into this. I should have put this in the notes. I didn't. Anthony Fauci was very strongly focused on using a medication called AZT on people that had AIDS, which then ended up killing them quicker than the disease itself. So, I think there's a lot to look into on Anthony Fauci, and hopefully this does happen. Now, since we're continuing to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, Rep. Ro Khanna, who is a Democrat, introduced an amendment to a bill earlier this week that would force the DOJ to release all of the Epstein evidence. And here is Ro Khanna talking about that.
Mr. Speaker, I introduced today an amendment demanding the full release of the Epstein files. The Speaker's Rules Committee should demand a vote tomorrow of every member of Congress. Yes, we should release it, or no, we should not. This is a question of whose side are you on? Are you on the side of protecting the rich and the powerful who've put their thumb on the scales of government to suck out millions of dollars while working class Americans suffer? Or are you on the side of the people? The Attorney General said on her desk was the Epstein file. And now she's saying, no, nothing to see, don't release it. This is a question of trust. We need to release the Epstein files so we can restore government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And every member of Congress tomorrow should be forced to vote on this amendment.
Now, when it came to a vote in committee, 7 Republicans voted no on this, and they are as follows: Virginia Foxx, Republican from North Carolina; Nick Langworthy, Republican from New York; Austin Scott, Republican from Georgia; Morgan Griffith, Republican from Virginia; Brian Jack, Republican from Georgia; Michelle Fischbach, Republican from Minnesota; and Aaron Hochin, Republican from Indiana. So this is another rare time that I agree with a Democrat on a particular political issue going on. However, the way Ro Khanna's original amendment was worded would have forced the DOJ to release child porn on their websites, so he had to then draft another amendment that would clarify what he wanted, which would be essentially the release of those who Jeffrey Epstein was working with. And somehow he was able to get around this committee to bring it to a vote on the floor of House of Representatives, to which they voted 211 to 210 on blocking the release of the Epstein files. Mind you, the Republican Party controls both the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the presidency. So Republicans blocked this notion to release the list of people that Jeffrey Epstein was working with. So, yeah, like I said last week, if you think politicians have your interest at heart, they don't, and this clearly shows it. Um, and like I think I said last week, or probably the last 2 weeks, I doubt this will ever come out because politicians on both sides of the aisle, as well as, big time, donors to these politicians, probably a lot of people in the entertainment industry, and, a lot of big time Christians and well known pastors are probably on that list as well because, wolves like to wear sheep's clothing. And if you think that's where I'm ending with a lot of religious stuff, no, I got a whole segment at the end of this video. So, continuing on with the whole Epstein debacle, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Jeffrey Epstein's ride or die, essentially, has recently said that she is willing to testify before Congress about Jeffrey Epstein and his evil deeds. Now, I hope that she can, and I hope that stuff is televised because the whole world needs to know this. But again, doubt that'll happen. Similarly, the Trump DOJ fired Maureen Comey, who was the prosecutor from the Southern District of New York. And funny enough, she was Epstein's prosecutor and the daughter of James Comey, who, as I mentioned last week, since we talked about it with Tulsi Gabbard, James Comey was one of the people on the whole Russia collusion hoax. Maureen Comey worked on the Diddy case, Jeffrey Epstein's case, and Ghislaine Maxwell's case. So it's weird how that all works together. And again, showing how, those files will probably never come out because those people are all intertwined. Now, to throw shade at the right, several right-wing influencers like Charlie Kirk and Dinesh D'Souza apparently received a memo from the Trump administration basically telling them to drop the whole Epstein stuff. Now, let me say this as clearly as possible. You should never, ever trust the government at their word, especially when it's the ones you voted for. And when anyone from the government says to stop talking about a thing, you keep talking about it and talk about it more and even louder than before. There's plenty of examples as to why you should never trust the government, going back to how, the federal government treated the Native Americans to, even after slavery was ended because of the Civil War, with all the Jim Crow stuff. You had the Tuskegee experiments. There was 9/11, all the stuff that happened in the 90s with Ruby Ridge, Waco. They lied about the whole Iraq war, WMDs, and now this. So, there's a whole laundry list of reasons why you should never trust the government, especially when it's the people you voted for. Now, finally, Trump recently said that the Epstein stuff is a Democrat hoax and doubled down on Pam Bondi, as you'll see here.
No, she's given us just a very quick briefing, and in terms of the credibility of the different things that they've seen, and I would say that, these files were made up by Comey, they were made up by Obama, they were made up by the Biden, we went through years of that with the Russia hoax, with all of the different things that we had to go through. We've gone through years of it, but she's handled it very well. And it's going to be up to her. Whatever she thinks is credible, she should release, yeah.
Then Trump made a post on Truth Social saying that he doesn't want the support of people who are constantly harping on this. And his post reads, "The radical left Democrats have hit pay dirt again. Just like with the fake and fully discredited Steele dossier, the lying 51 intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, which the Dems swore had come from Russia. No, it came from Hunter Biden's bathroom. And even the Russia scam itself, a totally fake and made-up story used in order to hide crooked Hillary's big loss in the 2016 presidential election. These scams and hoaxes are all the Democrats are good at. It's all they have. They are no good at governing, no good at policy, and no good at picking winning candidates. Also, unlike Republicans, they stick together like glue. Their new scam is what we'll forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, and my past supporters have bought into this bullshit hook, line, and sinker. They haven't learned their lesson and probably never will, even after being conned by the lunatic left for 8 long years. I have made more success in 6 months than perhaps any president in our country's history, and all these people want to talk about, with strong prodding by the fake news and the success-starved Dems, is the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. Don't even think about talking of our incredible and unprecedented success, because I don't want their support anymore. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Make America great again. Now, while I will admit that the Trump administration has had a lot of success so far in the president's second term, this is a very big blunder, and there's an easy way to finally get off of this issue. One, Trump could admit, yes, I knew Jeffrey Epstein in the past, but when I found out he was an absolute creep, I banned him from Mar-a-Lago, and yes, I was introduced to my current wife, Melania, by Jeffrey Epstein, but there was no illegal things happening at that time. Well, I'm sure there was, but just admit that you weren't doing anything illegal and release the names of people that Jeffrey Epstein was working with. If you did that, we would move on from this real quick. It's that easy. I don't understand why I do understand why we're still talking about it, because the administration has blundered this so bad. It's crazy. Now, a little bit of sad news again. President Trump was recently diagnosed with chronic venous insufficiency, or CVI for short, which happens in people with damage to their veins. Now, this is a common health condition for elderly people, and I'm sure everybody has seen, elderly people with, like, you can see their veins in their legs and stuff. That's what this is from. And that's what this is. CVI means that you have trouble moving blood from your extremities back to your heart. Treatments can range from simple medications, changes in diet and exercise, which we know Trump isn't going to do because he loves his McDonald's and Diet Coke, wearing compression socks to help circulate blood back up from the legs, up to several surgical treatments if it is that bad. Now, I don't think that President Trump is going to die anytime soon from, like, a heart-related issue or because of this. And I'm sure that the president has the best medical team available at this time. And we kind of saw that in his first term when he had COVID and then was back out like a week later or whatever it was. So it sucks, but this seems like it's very treatable. Now on to some crazy news. Colorado District Attorney Amy Padden is taking some heat recently and is potentially facing a recall election because she wants to dismiss all charges on a man who attempted to abduct an 11-year-old from an elementary school. And here is her picture and this creep's picture right here. And I think she should be recalled, and this guy probably needs to be locked up in a padded room because he looks like a friggin' zombie. Yeah, why you would want to do that, I don't know, but again, that's the Democrat Party for you, wanting to release actual predators while attacking people who, criticize school boards for insane things they're trying to teach children. Now, this is a weird story here. Adam Stewart, the CEO of a company called Crowds on Demand, was allegedly offered $20 million to organize anti-Trump protests, but rejected the offer over fears that the protests would turn violent. So it seems like this CEO has some common sense in his brain. It wasn't just looking at dollar signs. Other companies that are similar to Crowds on Demand are Talisman Family Alliance, K5 Ventures, Blake Patton, which is a company, not a person, and LIC Capital. Now, I'm not saying that any of these companies, including Crowds on Demand, are doing anything illegal, but with all of these protests that we've seen pop up suddenly, like we did in 2020 and so far into Trump's second term, I think maybe they need to be looked at for, potentially stirring up problems. Now, again, I'm not saying they are doing anything illegal, but it's just weird how you've got these companies like this that essentially organize crowds, and then these anti-Trump protests pop up, and some of them get violent. So, who knows? Who knows? Now, somebody who probably should go to jail is LA Mayor Karen Bass, as she is going to give illegal aliens cash cards to alleviate financial stress to those impacted by recent deportations. At this point, actions like hers are borderline treason, and I'll explain why. The Trump administration has labeled the narco gangs as terrorist organizations and therefore enemies of the United States. These gangs, we know for a fact, are trafficking people into the United States for, sex trafficking or working on marijuana farms, as we saw last week when ICE raided a marijuana farm where there were 14 children working there. And now Mayor Bass is trying to give money to these same people that are, affected by deportations. So at this point, she is essentially giving money to terrorist organizations. And therefore, she should be arrested on grounds of treason, in my opinion. I'm not a legal expert. I just pay attention to the news, put things together. Now, coming to an end here, and this is where I was talking about the segment on religion and stuff. Peter Thiel was recently on a podcast or doing an interview or whatever, and he made some interesting comments. And he basically said that Christianity means building a robot to put your mind and or soul into. And you'll see that here.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
in this.
Should
the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But I also would. I also would like us to radically solve these problems,
right.
And so it's always, I don't know, transhumanism is this, the ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body, and there's a critique of, let's say, the trans people in a sexual context, or I don't know, a transvestite is someone who changes their clothes and cross dresses, and a transsexual is someone where you change your, penis into a vagina, and we can then debate how well those surgeries work. But we want more transformation than that. The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's so pathetically little. And okay, we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. And then Orthodox Christianity, by the way, the critique Orthodox Christianity has of this is these things don't go far enough. Like that transhumanism is just changing your body, but you also need to transform your soul, and you need to transform your whole self. And so,
right. But the other, wait. I generally agree with what I think is your belief that religion should be a friend to science and ideas of scientific progress. I think any idea of divine providence has to encompass the fact that we have progressed and achieved and done things that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors. But it still also seems like, the promise of Christianity in the end is you get the perfected body and the perfected soul through God's grace. And the person who tries to do it on their own with a bunch of machines is likely to end up as a dystopian character.
Well, Let's articulate this.
And you can have a heretical form of Christianity, that says something else.
I don't know. I think the word nature does not occur once in the Old Testament, and so if you and there is a word in which a sense in which the way I understand the Judeo-Christian inspiration is it is about transcending nature. It is about overcoming things, and the closest thing you can say to nature is that people are fallen, and that's the natural thing in a Christian sense, is that you're messed up, and that's true. But there's some ways that with God's help, you are supposed to transcend that and overcome that.
I don't know where he came up with this idea, because this is absolutely crazy. I don't know if he took like a high dose of psychedelics or something, but you've got to be insane if you think that your call from God is to make an immortal body for mankind to put themselves into. Like, at that point, you are essentially trying to make man into God and or be God yourself, and that is like completely antithetical to what scripture actually says. It's absolutely insane. And finally, that's about all I've got for news this week. So if you want to end it here on news stuff, go ahead. But this last bit I think is very interesting. So if you've tuned in so far, thank you. Follow me on the socials. Stay tuned for this last bit if you're interested in religion and philosophy stuff. Patrick Bet-David, who hosts the PBD podcast, did a podcast this week with a guy by the name of Dr. Taylor Marshall. And they largely discussed Christianity in today's world. I have that linked down below if you want to go watch the podcast. I thought it was a very interesting one, as I have my own Christian beliefs. I went to school for a ministry degree that I'm now using to talk about news and politics on the internet. But to give you a little backstory on Dr. Taylor Marshall, he is a devout Catholic. He's an author and calls himself a Christian patriot, which I really don't have a problem with. And I largely agreed with a lot of his points in the podcast, such as the threat that Islam has to the modern world by infiltrating democratic countries and then essentially trying to pass legislation that favors Islam or enforces Islamic teachings. Christianity needing to grow a spine, and America needing to return to the Christian roots that founded this nation. I agree with those points. I disagree with his point that the state should dictate how the church conducts itself. Case in point, the First Amendment. It says that Congress shall pass no law, on the practice of religion and free speech and freedom of the press and assembly and all that stuff. Peaceably assembled. And I say that because while I was in college, I had to take a class on the Founding Fathers and the foundation of this country. And after reading in depth about Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, I found that they came to the same conclusion from two opposite perspectives. A little backstory, Thomas Jefferson was a deist, which means that he believed in God, but didn't really think that God had a lot of say in how people conducted their everyday lives, and therefore not much role in government. He had his own interesting views on God and Christianity, and therefore he didn't want government to dictate how the church did things. Or I'm sorry, he didn't want the church to dictate how government ran things. James Madison, on the other hand, he was very involved with the Anglican Church, the Church of England, as he was born and raised in Virginia, which was under, I don't want to say the rule of the Anglican Church, but the Church of England had a very large role in the colony at the time of Virginia. And, quick side note, every one of the 13 colonies had rules on the books that mandated church attendance at least once a week. So that right there completely dispels the argument that this nation, it was never a Christian nation. It absolutely was. But I'm getting to my point here. So James Madison was very devout in the Church of England, and at one point he thought that yes, the government should dictate how religion does things. Since these two guys came from, completely opposite sides, they eventually came to the same conclusion that people should attend church, but it shouldn't be mandated by the federal government, because ultimately the government would corrupt the church, and the church would get way too involved with government. So that there dispels the whole argument that this was never a Christian nation. And I can hear the arguments now. What about slavery? What about this and that? Those things were bad. And and even at the founding of the country, after the Revolutionary War, the founding fathers largely did not want slavery to exist, but they couldn't get rid of it because then the southern colonies would have broke away, and then the whole thing would have been for naught, hence the lead up to the Civil War. So how do we fix this problem then in today's America? In my opinion, well, first let me say this. I do not think that there should be mandated religion, as, we've seen with the Church of England and with how the Catholic Church had an iron fist on things for centuries, leading up to the Protestant Reformation and then even long after that. So no, I don't think that there should be, state mandated religion, because then you get into a theocracy, and then we're no better than the same largely Muslim countries that, throw gay people off of buildings. In my opinion, the church needs a bit of a cultural shift without compromising the gospel. For too long, the church has turned their nose on people who belong to the LGBT community, or worse, by having crazies go to pride parades with signs, and this is where I said, probably want to watch on Rumble. They'll go to these pride parades with signs that say things like, God hates fags and burn in hell sinner, instead of showing up with, a cooler filled with bottled water and a sign saying, can I pray for you? Because we all know that a lot of people in the LGBT community have mental health issues, probably drug abuse, bad home life, very, very messed up people who are in dire need of the Word of God. Or maybe they've even been hurt by the church themselves. And I can sympathize with that. So maybe if you tried changing your tactics a little bit there, you might win the people that you're trying to win over. Similarly, the church has shunned like Christian hard rock and heavy metal because it sounds satanic. Yet bands like Stryper, going back to the 80s, and they're still going today, and Skillet, just two very well-known bands, they are very devout Christians. But the church had no problem adopting like Christian hip-hop and rap, even though secular hip-hop and rap is absolutely filthy and foul. It just doesn't make any sense. So if we want a cultural shift back to the Christian roots that founded this nation, the church needs to somehow attract the very people that they claim they want to reach without compromising the message of the Bible. And this goes back to the church needing to grow a spine, because there are some things in the Bible, and I'm not saying I'm perfect. I am very imperfect, as you've seen in my content before. Where am I going with this? We are all imperfect beings, but for too long, pastors have not addressed certain issues going on in today's world, and therefore they've kind of allowed the wolves to sneak in sheep's clothing, to the point where you have like the Episcopalian church with their head priest or whoever it was scolding Trump earlier this year, and their head priest was a woman, which kind of goes against the teachings of the Bible, and promoting the whole LGBT thing, which also goes against the Bible. And I'm not saying for people to be mean or rude or attack people. I'm saying that you need to change your tactics on how you're trying to win people, is what I'm saying. So that's all I've got this week. Thank you for sticking around for this very small snippet of, religion and philosophy here. And let me know what you think down in the comments below. Am I completely off base? Do you agree with me? Let me know, because I would love to hear people's opinions on this one. So, and if you stuck around for the news and got this far, thank you as well, because I appreciate your support and the views. So take care, and I will see you all next week.